Hey there, horror fans, and welcome to episode 84 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. This week's guest is writer-artist Michael Hague. He recently created an incredible adaptation/continuation of Bram Stoker's Dracula called Mammon, currently available from Dark Horse Comics. Hague's artwork is something completely unique that you won't find anywhere else on comic shelves today. It's a really interesting story with a number of unexpected twists and turns, plus there are monkey ninjas in it. What more do you need? In other news, I'll be covering New York Comic Con again this year, so if you're going to the show, hit me up on Twitter as @JamesFerguson or via email at jferguson@horrortalk.com. I'd love to meet some listeners. I've also set up some in-person interviews that I'm really looking forward to. Those will be a little shorter, so I'll probably compile them into a larger episode like I did last year. Alright, that's all for the housekeeping this week, so let's dive right into episode 84 of Funny Book Splatter with my guest, Michael Hague. Alright, so to dive right in, if you had to describe Mammon, am I pronouncing that right first? I guess I should have asked that first too.
Mammon's correct.
Mammon. So if you had to if you had to describe Mammon to someone, how would you pitch the book to them?
Well, it would be, the traditional vampire story, but then it twists a bit. It's in the 1920s, and the main protagonist is a writer for New York Times. He sees a play called Dracula, and he starts to wonder. Then he starts to receive a mysterious note, and he's plunged into the world of vampires and other things.
Yeah, it's funny because Mammon starts with this with what seems like the traditional Dracula story, and I think you even mentioned in the afterword for the book and some of the back matter for the book that you had started to do an adaptation for Dracula, and then it took a strange turn and you kind of went into this original territory, and it is really unlike anything else I've ever seen. So can you talk a little bit about, I guess, where did that turn come about? Where did you get to a certain point in the story and then go, oh no, I should do this instead?
I thought about doing just the straight Dracula story, but it's been done, I don't know how many times. And so I started over, and I know that the play was a big hit on Broadway in the 20s. So I started from that angle. And the hero was going to be the writer, and he would go see what vampires really are about.
Yeah, some of the story, it's interesting how the writer kind of gets in over his head pretty quickly, where it's like he becomes obsessed with this idea and has to pursue it to the end and find out this story. So I guess a part of it is that reporter angle where, I want to see what's going on, but also there are hints that he's kind of looking for something else in life. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's true. He likes his job, but there's got to be something more, I think he feels. Mm-hmm. And the letter that comes to him in this rather strange way kind of catapults him into this adventure.
Yeah, and it kind of goes from like 0 to 60 in like in no time at all, because he's instantly pulled into this. And again, like you think you know what the story may be in terms of the traditional classic Dracula tale, but then it goes into a completely different direction, and he's not just this guy who's going to get roped into Dracula and whatnot. It's something way different. I want to be cognizant of spoilers and stuff, but I mean, this mythology and folklore that you're dealing with here, were you pulling that from the original Dracula story, or are these just kind of like a mix of a number? I mean, you have some elements of Christianity and stuff in there. There's a lot of the supernatural and the other world, the kind of afterworld sentiment.
Yeah, killing for Christ or something like that.
The Crusades, but in a very different way.
Yeah. I don't know. It was just fun to do. But I originally it was going to be almost a straight Dracula story, and I thought, well, everybody does this, so I ventured off. And when I realized that the play was a huge hit in the 20s, I decided to set the story in the late 20s.
So what about Dracula kind of stood out for you that made you want to at least initially adapt the story? What was it that kind of drew you to that story?
It's my favorite monster, really. They're can't die unless you kill them with a stake. And then Mammon is something else. He's not really just a vampire. He's much, much more. He takes, not just kill the body, but the soul, and destroys all the atoms in you.
Yeah, it's definitely a transformation, and it's unlike anything from a traditional vampire story.
Well, he develops a code, and certain people he'll kill, and others, if they live a good life, they won't be harmed.
Yeah, it's kind of a new kind of judgment in that case.
Yeah.
So Mammon has a very striking appearance too. I mean, how did you come about that particular design for him? Like we rarely see him without his cloak and kind of outfit there, but you could tell from the moment that he pops up on the page that there's something else going on here. He is a monster in some shape or fashion.
Yeah, the scars all over his body, kind of scale, and a rather sick individual, but has this immense power, and he has a sense of humor too. I actually like.
Yeah, it's you can see how the writer kind of gets roped into all this, because it's easy to fall under this character's spell with what he's doing there, and especially since he's throwing all this stuff at him. Like, it's tough to kind of like you suddenly find yourself on an adventure of sorts, and this is what comes about.
Yeah.
Like, and there's a risk of complete death or something worse, but it's worth the risk, it seems, for the story.
Got to get that story. So, it was I don't know. I just like the character so much. And I don't know what to say. It was just fun to do. And that story sort of took a life on its own. And I had no idea where I was going to go with it.
Yeah, it was, was the kind of end result surprising to you as well as you kind of continue to go through the story?
Yeah, I thought, this looks okay. I like this.
Was there anything that you wanted to fit in here? Because I mean, like this has just about everything, it seems. From you dive into history and folklore from multiple continents. Was there anything that you wanted to try to fit in here that didn't quite make it?
You mean like a moral?
Well, I guess just in terms of other monsters or creations and stuff that they could have popped up throughout the story.
Yeah, he's a guy who becomes fascinated, Mammon, with Christianity, but he's a bad guy. He's a monster, so he practices it in a rather odd way. And then he has his sister, who is the first vampire, and his friends also are supernatural characters.
Yeah, so you kind of have a little bit. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I don't know what I was going to say.
Yeah, I was just curious if there's anything else that considering how vast and epic in scope the Mammon is, was there anything else that you were interested in fitting into the book that might not have made it?
Oh, things that were cut out, and there was went into about the whole army of these goons that they've created, and they had their own code also, but it became just too much. I thought so. They got cut out.
Yeah, I mean, already, like I said, the size and scope of this is massive. There's so much. It is going through, multiple continents. It's everything. This is. I mean, I'm sure you got asked this a lot when you.
Hello. Connection.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me still?
Hello.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's funny. I've had this pop up a couple times lately with Skype. I don't know what it is, but like everything comes through fine on my side, but for some reason it seems to cut in and out sometimes on the other end. So, do you hear me okay now?
Well, I have my entire IT crew here, so any trouble comes up, he can do it.
All right. So far so good on my side. So okay. I'm sure you got asked this a lot about Mammon, but this is somewhat of a departure from your usual work, with more of traditional or children's books fare. Was this something that you've kind of been like itching to get out or approach in a different style than your usual work?
Usually I've done children's books from the late 70s up to current time. And so, I wanted something different to do. Everybody does. Every artist does anyway. And for me, I've done a couple of other stories, but this was the one I really liked.
Mm-hmm. Now, has horror always been something that you've been interested in?
No. I mean, I get scared like everyone else. The scariest movie I ever saw was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the old one with Spencer Tracy. And it was basically because he's an average guy, quite nice, and he turns into a monster, just like Mr. Meeks. So I gather things that I'm not even aware of sometimes.
Just like stuff kind of, I guess, gets into your head somewhere and it's just kind of kicking around?
Yeah, and sometimes it's just a bad idea. And you just discard it.
So do you find yourself, I guess, sketching something out and realizing, no, this isn't good, and then just kind of tossing it out the door for now?
Exactly. Yeah, maybe I'll use this somewhere else.
Well, that's the beauty of, comics in general, is that you're able to kind of, you may be able to repurpose that down the line. So there's while there might not be I guess there's never usually a totally bad idea, in that there's usually something that you can just kind of, maybe it wasn't its time yet, I guess is what I'm getting at. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. It's a different story. Doesn't belong there.
Waste not, want not, I guess.
Exactly.
So you mentioned Jekyll and Hyde in terms of like your scary, with the universe or a scary movie that you were interested in or intrigued you in the past. I think the Universal monsters tends to come up a lot when I speak to creators. It's something that I don't know why, but it's kind of had an impressionable experience on everyone, like multiple generations worth of creators. I think.
Yeah, usually you see that. Stuff when you're young, so it has an effect on you, I think. I know I was probably 8 or 9 when I saw that particular movie, and it stayed with me all my life. I won't watch it.
Oh, really? It's made that much of an impression?
Yeah, it is. He was he's just a nice guy. It's Spencer Tracy, for crying out loud. And he becomes this monster. And I don't know. I wonder if real life people do that. Start out good and then end up bad.
Well, that also, I think, lends an added element to horror, because when you can relate to the character, or when you become invested in the character like that, it becomes, everything that happens to them becomes a million times scarier. So seeing like, hey, I consider myself a regular guy. What could happen in my life that can turn me into a monster like that? And that can be a really chilling thought.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe you look like an uncle and you can't stand to see that uncle anymore. It's I don't know. That's the scariest for me. Supernatural, I can deal with, but real life is kind of difficult.
Yeah, when things get a little too real, I guess that can hit a little too close to home in some cases. So that's why I have trouble with the home invasion horror stories, because that just freaks me right out, and I can't fathom something like that. That's a little too scary for me. But yeah, Dracula and monsters and werewolves and stuff like that, sure, I have no problems with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I can handle that. It's the real life stuff that's scary.
one monster in particular that really stood out for me in Mammon was Satan himself. And it's not your kind of traditional look, he's not the regular thorns with, like, I don't know, like your goatee kind of look at a pitchfork. This is something else. And like where did that come from? Because I think the part that really does it for me, to be honest, is like how his jaw goes up into where his nose should be. Like, how does that even work? Like, how does his mouth work in something like that? That's terrifying.
I have no idea. So he says very few words, but yeah, I didn't want, you're going the traditional route anyway with vampires and Carpathian mountains, but I wanted something different for the devil, the actual devil, Satan. And so, you just come about this through sketching.
Yeah, I'm very curious as to the path that you took to get to the final results in this book, because it is something else. Like, it is just like, it's striking, and it's something that, like, even flipping through the book again now, it's like when I come across that image, it's something that you stop on for a little while, but then I also don't really want to stop on because it is so, like, grotesque and menacing.
Yeah, it reminded me a bit of the Pizza the Hut and what's that movie?
I don't know. It's completely unlike anything else I've seen especially when it comes to depicting Satan. But it is like monstrous in every shape, every sense of the word. There, it's like, no wonder that, like, it can be such an intimidating force in a book like this.
But it's the last picture in the book, and so I want it to be something memorable.
Yeah, that stays with you. That was something. That and the ninja monkeys were the two things that I was like, oh, this book is some next level stuff. Like, I wasn't expecting either of those things.
Yeah, ninja monkeys was, I don't know, a fun thing. I've done this before where I had an army of monkeys, and I think I a little bit afraid of monkeys, to tell you the truth.
Why
I don't
that?
like them. Yeah. They're too human.
Yeah, they are a little too close to us on the evolutionary ladder there.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was a nice touch to have them in there. It was like, oh, I wasn't expecting this, but I'm happy to see that it's in here.
Well, at one point there was a story I was writing, and it had to do with the Japanese girl, who's hunted by warlords and comes upon these monkeys with that army of monkeys that help her out. But so I put a bit of that into the story, at least the background for the Tsushimi, the girl vampire.
Yeah.
And so I had other, how she gets her sword, but everything was running too long, so that got cut out. I don't know. She goes to a mountain to kill a devil, that sort of thing. So I put some of it in, and some of it I just had to leave out.
Yeah. How did the project ultimately end up at Dark Horse?
I had contacted Mike Richards. Oh, gosh. Well, I don't remember, but I had sent him a story that I had started writing, and I couldn't, yeah, let's do it.
I've worked with lots of publishers. Just that easy?
Yeah, it was that easy. So, I just liked Dark Horse as a company and things they did. And prior to this, I had done Eye of Newt with them, which was a 4-book comic book. And, So, I think this one's better. I like it. I was excited to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it helps if you had some history with Dark Horse there to at least get your foot in the door, I guess. But yeah, it's I think that kind of excitement and interest shows in Mammon, because you get, like, this seems, I don't want to say a personal tale, because it's something like, if this was a personal tale with that creepy ass Satan, like I don't know if what that says about the people involved in the book, but it's clearly something that took a lot of care and time to put together to ultimately get on the page.
It took me 2 years. Yeah, I took 2 years doing this, and I hear stories about some of the old comic book artists where they get paid for they have to put 2.5 pages in a day. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't know how to do that. Mm-hmm. I could do it, but it'd be sketches.
What's your usual, I guess, schedule like? If you're doing, we understand you're not doing 2.5 pages a day, but I guess do you crank out like one a day or something like that? That's what it seems like the average-ish is.
I don't think I do that. One every 3 or 4 days. Page I'm talking about, not illustration.
And is that everything from beginning to end? So like the pencils, the inks, the colors, the letters?
Yeah, everything but the lettering. I can't do lettering.
Okay. Now, being that you're the writer and the artist for this, how do you approach the story? Do you write out a full script? Do you kind of just start drawing? How is there a balance there?
I start off with just the writing and sketching. And the sketching doesn't have to be anything specific to what I'm writing at that moment. But usually I have a complete text of the story before I begin painting. So I don't know. If I just did the illustration, it'd be quicker. Or if I just did the writing, it'd be quicker. But since I'm doing both, it takes me forever.
Well, it's you from beginning to end. Like it's your whole story. So it's not like you're waiting on on an artist or waiting on the writer to give you the things you need to continue creating. It's all in your head. And I'm always curious from the writer artist standpoint how they kind of dive into a story, because it seems like it's pretty varied. There's no like set rule, but I mean that's also the case for comics in general. But most seem to gravitate more towards a script, so they kind of have those guidelines and knowing what needs to be on the page, and then they use that to as the kind of the guidelines there to make the overall book.
Yeah, I tend to do the illustrations or sketching in my mind. That's the fun part. The hard part is writing for me. But yeah, I spend I don't know how long on just one picture, and hope it works out. But I'm doing something that's fun, and not many people can say that.
That's good. I mean, it's important that you're enjoying what you're doing. So if this was a slog and there was a pain in the ass, and you hated doing it, like, what's the point of that?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a pot of money at the end. But,
I'll let you know if I see any rainbows or leprechauns kicking around.
Okay. I'll have Mammon.
So, I mean, the way Mammon is set up, there's still a lot that could be explored in this story. I guess depending on how this goes, would you be interested in exploring this further?
Yeah, I would. I haven't thought of a sequel, but it's such a fun to do. I'd love to do another one.
I mean, or I guess, are there other are those classic monster stories that might be of interest for you to kind of take your own spin on it?
Yeah, the Mummy, the Frankenstein. They're all could be, but I just like how the way it turns out, Mammon, and it wasn't supposed to be about Mammon in the beginning. So I don't know. It's a pleasant way to while away the hours.
Yeah, I know that's like the dopey interview question to ask, like, well, all right, you just finished this, you just spent 2 years making this entire project, and now it's finally out in the world, but what else you got? I recognize that that's kind of like the annoying thing to ask, but I'm always curious, like, if there's anything else in the hopper that people can talk about just yet, especially when it comes to something, especially after reading something like Mammon. Like, yeah, my interest has been piqued. So
yeah, I'm doing a children's book that's not really for children. I seem to do a lot of those. It's the Brilliant Child's Guide to Phobias. Okay. And I like illustrating the phobias. And they're all true. They all can kill you. Everything.
Well, yeah, yes. I guess I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing to let kids know that early on in life that everything in the world can and probably will kill them.
One of these things is going to get you.
So you mentioned your painting there as well. So is it safe to assume that you're not creating digitally? You're doing everything in traditional paper? Oh, you are doing digitally.
No. Yeah, Mammon. It's interesting. I don't know, about 2003, I started doing electrical painting. And, the first few things or first couple of years, everything's terrible. And now I spend my time trying to make it look like a watercolor instead of electric, a digital painting. And I wonder, why am I doing that? Why don't I just paint it? There's a lot of things with the digital painting that you can do that I just can't do traditionally.
Yeah, so I guess during that time, look, it's been 15 years since you made the jump over to digital, so I'm assuming you've picked up a few tips and tricks along the way to kind of help you get to this spot. Yeah,
a few things, I just don't like the way paintings look when it's, particularly comic books, where it has that digital look and, kind of flat colors. And so I spend all my time trying to make it look like a watercolor.
Well, that's why, you fooled me, at least in that case, because I just figured you had done all this in the old school way, but in terms of the way it looks and feels, because it has that kind of quality to it. It's certainly unlike anything else that's on the stands today in traditional comics.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was different, but I don't know. Sometimes being different doesn't translate to people enjoying the book or even knowing about it. So.
Yeah, but I think there's an audience there for all that kind of stuff now. So it's the comics is so open and diverse right now that there's you could be a little weird. You could be as weird as you want for any sort of story, and there's certainly someone there that's going to identify with it and read it and understand it. So for any fans of vampires in general, but obviously specifically things like Dracula, this is something that's like, you thought you heard this story before, but now try it through this lens.
Yeah. And, I love starting with the Dracula story and ending up here. It's just the nature of creativity. You start with one thing, you end up with something else. So you're not tied down to one thing. Mm-hmm. Like the Dracula story.
Yeah, that was just kind of like your starting point, and you're able to take it in a number of really cool directions instead.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so Mammon's all out now. That's been I guess it's out there in the world from Dark Horse. You can pick it up at your local comic shop. You can pick it up at on Amazon and booksellers and stuff like that. Otherwise, right. the best places to find you online would that be like probably your website?
Facebook. Okay. Yeah.
All right, so we can link that in the show notes as well.
I know how to operate.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, whatever helps to get your word out there.
Yeah, whatever's comfortable for me, I'll use. And Facebook seems pretty comfortable so far. And for some reason, I'm getting all these friend requests that I don't understand.
From complete strangers or from fans?
Yeah, well, they could be fans, I guess. Some of them are. But I don't know why.
Well, some of them could just be spam and bots and that kind of stuff, so be careful with that kind of stuff. Don't want to accidentally get hacked.
Yeah. Right. Not that there's anything to hack.
That's just how it starts. They get in on one side, and then it ends up taking over a bunch of other nonsense. Yeah, I've heard horror stories like that. So
I'll keep my eyes open.
Sounds good. Well, Michael, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. I'm after reading Mammon, I was like, I gotta talk to this guy and get an understanding of where this story could come from. So I'm glad we had a chance to chat here.
Well, thank you. I'm totally stoked that you called and interviewed me.
Yeah, I mean, this was a lot of fun. So we'll wrap it up here. But again, Mammon is out now. You can pick up your local comic shop, bookstores, where have you. But that will wrap it up then for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I have been James Ferguson with my guest Michael Hague. See, I screwed it up. I'm going to do that again. Michael Hague, right? Yeah. So
right.
So close. This is why I have editing, so it's fine. So that wraps it up for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I have been James Ferguson with my guest Michael Hague. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. We've been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and much more. Be sure to sign up to Steve's Deals newsletter to increase your horror collection without breaking the bank. Check us out at HorrorTalk.com and at HorrorTalk on Twitter.